Good tidings, friends. As you may notice, I am wearing a pink wig. It is styled in a Sarah Farron style because I have not actually styled what this wig is actually going to be for, and if you are watching this video when it comes out or notice the date and remember the thing that happened on this, well, yesterday technically, fucking Marluxia, am I right though? Right, so I don't even know where to begin. It took me all day yesterday to translate the new cutscenes, and of course by the time I finished translating them, other people who are better at Japanese had also finished translating them. And I wanted to do that before doing the video to be sure I had all possible information before getting down to the whiteboard of Marluxia-related theories. Because if you haven't been paying attention to the Japanese Kingdom Hearts Union Cross, Marluxia is not just confirmed, oh no. Marluxia, or his somebody who I have yet to see consistently Romanized, Laurium seems to be the closest one. We'll find out what they have it as officially. He showed up during the time of the Keyblade War as the 5th goddamn motherfucking 2nd gen foreteller. So like literally yesterday, as soon as I saw this, I called Ben and was just screaming on the phone for several hours and crying and stuff, because that literally came out of goddamn nowhere. Literally nowhere. So, getting right into it, and enough of me rambling and opening. Like I said, here is a very large whiteboard of notes that I took after watching the new cutscene a couple of times, the stuff ramping up to it with I cannot pronounce her name. The blonde one with the pigtails. Is it Strazella? My mouth won't make the word, so I keep calling her that bitch, even though she's a precious child and did nothing wrong. But I will probably refer to her, for the most part, in this video as pigtails. Because my mouth just, I see it, I read it, and my mouth just, I'm sorry. You know, a lot of people, I'm sure you're excited that Marluxia is back, and that is, like, level 1 of the, like, mind-splosion here. But the amount of implications, I'm just going to talk about it instead of talk about it hypothetically. So, starting off, yes, he is the 2nd generation foreteller. Now, for those of you who watched the whole cutscene and not just a clip of him being revealed or saw it on the internet, you'll know that the actual 5th foreteller was supposed to be Pigtail Girl. And, she got shanked. It was sad. It was very sad. Like, she just fucking died. And it was depressing. And I don't know, I might be reading this too into this, and this wasn't something I went back and double-checked, but the shrink sound effect sounded very similar to the same one that they used in Chain of Memories, that I personally, like, associated with Marluxia, but I'm pretty sure it is the same sound clip they used as Axel. It would be Shink Shank for Axel, because he has 2 weapons. But they use a lot of the same sound effects, given that it is a similar type of platform. But someone who is there, of the 5 current foretellers, the first thing we have to talk about, is not actually supposed to be there, and most people, myself included, immediately assumed, well, Marluxia or Laurium, tiny 15-year-old somebody Marluxia, shanked a bitch, took her book, and walked up to the party like, I'm definitely supposed to be here. But we must, you know, as obvious as it seems, look at all possibilities, and knowing Nomura, that could be a red herring, the way that they set that up, to make it very obviously seem that it was Marluxia. Like, it's so obvious if you stop for a minute, you're like, that's almost too obvious. Especially with some other things I'm going to talk about Marluxia's character and things regarding Marluxia in general, that might make you more convinced that it could have been one of the other characters. Now, while we're talking about Marluxia and Lauriam, let's talk about Blaine and the fact that he's pretty much a Yenzo. I haven't gotten a chance to do a video on this separately. I'm going to talk about him a lot in tandem in this video with Marluxia because it's hard to separate the two at this point, given that we basically have 3 characters currently in the current time, also in the past. Because, I mean, I'm sorry. Now that Marluxia's there, I don't see any way that Blaine isn't somehow connected to Yenzo. But that's a whole... We'll get to the full shebang of that, as he might not technically literally be Yenzo, because there are some notable differences between his relationship to Yenzo versus Ven obviously being Ven and Marluxia obviously being Marluxia. But the point is, it could have been him. Yenzo is a precious child, but he's also kind of a sketchy bitch. I mean, yes, Marluxia is the assassin, which is another reason him, like, killing this bitch seems a little on the nose to me, but... you know, Yenzo is the schemer, so maybe he's the one who slipped it in. Also, I'd like to point out, maybe it was Ventus. And you might be thinking, but Ventus is a Disney princess. Now he's not. Now he still has 50% of distilled vanitas up in that Kokoro, so who knows what fucked up shit he's capable of at this current point in time. He could be more percent vanitas secretly, and just be better at not... being better at pretending to be socially adjusted, and not a violent psychopath. So it very easily could have been him who killed this bitch, although, after thinking about it, I think it's a little less likely just because I think he's the one with the real Book of Prophecies, because of the cutscenes when he was introduced with Ava talking to the Master of Masters, which... I have not gotten to talk about because I have a bunch more of these whiteboards with Ven on it, and I was going to do a full, Soul Line, You're Not a Real Person episode on it with pretty editing, which I will do, but for now I have to stick to Xehashorts because my computer is almost fixed for Dissidia, but is still in pieces in the other room. But this needs to be talked about because fucking Marluxia, am I right? Whether or not he is legitimately one of the second generation foretellers or union leaders, as I've noticed in the current cutscene, they seem to be not, like, purposefully being sure to distinguish this next generation of leaders as not to be foretellers, which is what I had been referring to them before, because it just seemed to make sense to me. But, moving on, so as I was saying, with him and Blaine and Ven, in the future, if you look at Marluxia and you know him in Train of Memories, and he's, like, looks to be in my... Like, if I had to guess his age, I'd say 28. Ventus, at that same point in time, would actually be 25. He just hasn't aged because he's in a stasis. So, they're basically the same age, and also the same age as they were back during the time of the Keyblade War. Yenzo is, like, 8, or possibly younger. And obviously younger than Blaine, which is a lot weirder than him being older than Blaine. Although, I will say it is technically possible that because of the nature of the sprites, we can't tell that he's a tiny child, but I don't think that, really. But it's not ruled out. So the point being is I'm fairly confident that whatever Ven and Marluxia did to wind up in the current time period is different than Blaine, and I think Ven and Marluxia, or Lauriam, stasised their ways in, which was already a popular theory, where they somehow were in, like, a cryogenic sleep. Whereas, because obviously, people don't age when they sleep. Ven is sleeping right now, he's still fucking 14. So, whereas I think, as Baby Nort said, to travel to time, one must leave their body behind, and I think that's how he wound up in a body that was younger than his actual body, is that he legitimately time traveled. As far as that is concerned, this means Yenzo could be a replica, and that he went into an empty replica that was otherwise failed, developed its own personality, and so Evan adopted it. It could mean that they were trying, because we saw in the new Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer that the Seekers were talking about trying to legitimately resurrect someone. And maybe Evan found notes and accidentally resurrected Blaine, or followed instructions to give Blaine a body to hop to into the future, or something along those lines, and that's how Ienzo came into existence. Frankly, from the beginning, I've been very suspicious about, oh yeah, we just have a random orphan. He's definitely a normal human, don't worry about it. You know, that's been, you know, questionable since Birth by Sleep, so this just is feeding fuel to that fire. Now, and of course, there is the big question of, could Ienzo and Blaine just be the goddamn Master of Masters? Now, you might be thinking that's a bit of a jump, but I would like to point out that this motherfucker has hair over one of his eyes, very conveniently. Now, we do see both of Ienzo's eyes rather regularly in Chain of Memories, under his bangs, but since we do know that there is a thing about the Master having pulled out one of his eyes and his habit of covering an eye, it could be false, that could be a hint. So I want to talk about the fact that if Marluxia is here at this time as one of the Union leaders, we also have to be sure that we're realizing he has a Keyblade. Marluxia is a Keyblade wielder. Now, there are a lot of implications about this and a lot of things we can think about. Something that me and Ven thought about while talking through this, and something that I realize is entirely possible is, you know, I don't even remember how I had this thought, but Kairi's Keyblade mental image came to my mind, and I went, wow, that's one flowery Keyblade. You know who's flowery? Marluxia. We don't know how Kairi got that Keyblade into her possession. We know Riku randomly got it from fucking nowhere and handed it over to her. Since Riku was basically the last living person in Castle Oblivion, he could have found it and picked it up and brought it to her, or Diz could have taken it, you know, or Naminé, who probably had a better idea of what was going on. If anyone in that castle knew that Marluxia was formerly a Keyblade wielder, including Marluxia, she is the most likely person to have known, because Naminé is obscenely OP. And given that to Riku to give to Kairi. Because free Keyblade just sitting around. Also, the name Destiny's Embrace, while, you know, Destiny Islands, it's poetic sounding, it seems like it matches Kairi. If you think about it, really is Xehanort. With his fatalist ideology and the idea of embracing destiny and letting it guide you, that actually matches his ideology better than the protagonist ideology, which would make the other, like, if you think about it really hard, the name of the Keyblade is kind of weird, and it actually makes it make more sense if you think about it. So, there's a strong possibility that obviously, Marluxia does have a Keyblade, and there's a strong possibility that that Keyblade is Kairi's Keyblade. I know. I can feel you judging me from here. About Marluxia and how he came to existence. We know that Braig randomly found him as one of the last ones, very close to the time that they started searching Castle Oblivion. It's possible that Marluxia popped up in Castle Oblivion at that time, or even earlier. This goes in with my theory that Castle Oblivion houses the Book of Prophecies. That is a theory I will fight you to the goddamn death for. I am pretty much 100% sure about this. And because of the Book of Prophecies might have been how they stasis themselves into the future, there's also the possibility, and I don't really want to think about this too hard because I already got mad about this because of Demix, that Ven and Marluxia are products of the Book of Prophecies and aren't real people, but that would mean Marluxia is not a real person twice, because he's a nobody, and he was no real person to start with because he's fucking Titus, and I don't want that. I just don't want that. Too many not real. But it seems very likely that he spawned, basically, as either Lauriam or Marluxia in Castle Oblivion when he reached our time, or wound up there for some reason, knowing the land of departure for some reason. It gets dicey, but he obviously has a connection with it, and that might have been why they made him Lord of the Castle instead of one of the higher-ranking members. Besides the fact that that was obviously we know that it was a huge scheme by Syax to basically get rid of the people he didn't like. And putting Marluxia in charge was also a very Game of Thrones-y tactical move to get all of them killed faster. That could have been why someone like Xemnas agreed to it, but I'm not entirely sure. Now, I'd also like to say that another thing I think Ven and Marluxia have in common is that they don't seem to have any memories of when they were Keyblade wielders. Now, I think Marluxia might be a little more in touch with his past than Ven. Ven obviously has no fucking idea, otherwise he wouldn't have been working for Master Xehanort at all, ever, for any reason. If he had his memories, though, he'd know about things like Chirithes and the science behind the Master of Masters' work and stuff like that. Not to as full of a degree as the Foretellers, but I'd feel like he'd be able to call a little bit more bullshit, but I think he did, and that's going to bring me to the next point. I used to joke, long before this came out, that if you think about it, if Marluxia had won in Chain of Memories, he would have saved the universe. Because he would have stopped Xemnas and fucked up Xehanort's plans to such a degree he wouldn't have been able to do anything anymore. He would have, like, just peed all over all of the lights and darknesses, and then he couldn't have them. Sora would be, like, totally, you know, screwed over. He'd have no access to his original 13 vessels, being the organization. He'd be kicked out of the world that never was. He'd be low on resources. He might have some kind of backup plan to deal with it, but, you know, he'd be out of Sora, he'd be out of Riku, probably wind up being out of Terra Ventus and Aqua, like, so that's the story of how Marluxia was secretly the good guy that I used to joke about because I thought it was funny to go, by the way, Marluxia technically was saving everyone, but I thought, but that's just funny because he's obviously a huge asshole. But maybe he wasn't. If he really was a Keyblade wielder and from this time, maybe he had a understanding legitimate, because I used to theorize once more information came out that the reason Marluxia became so obsessed with betraying the organization was finding out and knowing that Xemnas was going to betray on them and fill them all up with Xehanort and use them all as vessels, so he went, no, fuck you, but I'm gonna Game of Thrones this shit because I know I can't take all 12 of you by myself because I'm not that stupid. So I mean, this is all conjecture, but, it seems likely that he knew some level of what was going on, or had some understanding of things better than Ventus did from the past, able to help him want to stop the organization and find Kingdom Hearts and fix it. Of course, being from that era and knowing about Kingdom Hearts, his understanding of Kingdom Hearts would have been very different than all the other people in the organization, so on and so forth. Some of these notes are less finalized theories and more food for thought so we can get a discussion going, because this is in an early stage, and I will be doing a more thought out, so it's all Lion, You're Not a Real Person episode about this when things are up and running ASAP, rather than this Xehalong episode of me ranting at a camera and crying a lot about Marluxia being a Keyblade master. Like, not even just a Keyblade master, I want you to understand that being one of these union leaders makes him like a Keyblade PhD, okay? Like, in theory, this bitch knows more about Keyblades than Xehanort and Ericus and Yensid. Is that not just fucked up and weird to think about? And now we know what his nobodies were doing in Kingdom Hearts 3, because he was still around and probably still managed to have control over them with his advanced knowledge of things, that he might have gotten it back upon becoming a somebody or something else, or found this, that, and another thing. But he's probably not a seeker, which is good. Anyway, the point being, Marluxia may have, ironically, literally did nothing wrong, well, did a lot of things wrong, but for very good reasons, and was actually trying to help in the long run, perhaps looking at the Book of Prophecies and being one of those few people who went, no, fuck that shit, we're not doing this. Which you know, good for you, Marluxia, if you're channeling your inner Vane Solidor, which would be very ironic given you're voiced by Captain Vosh von Ronsenberg of Dalmasca. Fun fact, if you did not know that, he's also voiced by Blue Ricard from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which is very weird. Now, there's also, of course, a chance that he could be the Master of Masters, which seems... I mean, the Master of Masters' brain is, to quote Bruce Banner, a bag of cats. There is no understanding what's going on in his head, and we know... Well, we can't hear Marluxia's voice in... Or like, get a height comparison in the graphics of Key, which really dampens a lot of... You would be surprised how much you can figure out just by looking at a character model, honestly. Or hearing a voice actor. We do know the Master Master's voice actor. We know it's different than Marluxia's voice actor, but we also know things like Ben Diskin voices Tiny Nort, whereas Richard Epcar versus Older Nort, and then Leonard Nimoy voiced Elder Nort. So it could just be the voice of younger Marluxia, and he grows up to that. I don't really hear that, but it is technically a possibility. Also, some Master Masters, God only knows what kinds of things he can do. Half the internet is already sold in the fact that he's the one who's jumping bodies all over the goddamn place. So who fucking knows? But that is a distinct possibility that he trolled his way in there. He could also be Lushu. If Lushu, for whatever reason, decided, like, basically, okay, well, this is my role. I just watched the world blow up. I'm kind of done with some shit right now, and I know I'm not supposed to interfere with things, but I'm gonna interfere with some things, because fuck this noise. Now this is obviously taking a lot of liberty in assuming things that Lushu may or may not do, but that is a very Square Enix protagonist type, or Square Enix archetype of character type thing to do. It's been done before. Yeah. This might also, like, that, you know, and if you think about it too, that would mean that technically Marluxia would be the descendant, or the ancestor of Xemnas and, Ericus's, Xehanort and Ericus's master, which in a way would almost make sense because of how aggressively Ericus is, and because the aggressively Asian thing is associated with Sakura petals, and Marluxia's associated with Sakura petals, but that's some Hoenn confirmed shit, so I'm sorry I even brought that up. That's like, but technically the lines are there, and I'm sitting here going, you know, I made this shitpost about Marluxia a while ago, and apparently it's probably right, so I don't even fucking know what's real anymore. Also, another, point for Lushu is that his sin is lust, and that is... The internet will all just agree that that seems to suit Marluxia, honestly. So, notice that there are two characters, really, in the franchise who have large mechs. They are Xemnas and Marluxia during their final boss fight. Now, technically, Ansem in the original game had a mech-like ship thing, but that thing was also very specifically a giant Heartless, whereas we do not know exactly what Marluxia and Xemnas' giant obligatory Final Fantasy mech boss fight things technically were. Now, traditionally in a Final Fantasy game, you're really not supposed to. Do any of us understand all of Seymour's various random fucking forms and why they happen? No. No, we don't. Because they were mostly just there to look cool and introduce new mechanics. But Nomura, being Nomura, loving to make this series even more convoluted than it already is, probably came up with some kind of logic at some point that he wasn't going to share with the class, and then finally 10, 13 years later decided that he was, and that being, is Marluxia's final form, getting to the point, his Key Glider. What if both Xemnas and Marluxia lost the ability to properly summon their Keyblades in their true form, but still maintained some connection and control over them? Meaning, parts of Xemnas' dragon would be connected to his Key Glider, which makes sense given that he's wearing his Keyblade armor during that part of the fight, and Marluxia's little scythe mech thing was his Key Glider, or a darker manifestation of it. Which also might make more sense as to how someone like Namine Ariku would have picked it up on the floor later and it got to Kairi, if that is his Keyblade. It might not be, but it is very flowery and gay. Additionally, going back to pigtails, I want to know more about she, after watching all of her cutscenes, was obviously a loner and adorable and needed a lot of hugs, and was obviously cosplaying Chi from Chobits the whole time. Which is ironic, because I'm pretty sure Nomura went, heh, Chi. And that's how that happened. Anyway, did Marluxia know her? Did he just stalk her, finding out that she, even if he did kill her, how did he know who she was? How did he know that she had a book? Was he just silently stalking her? Was he her friend? Was he her friend and someone else killed him and he becomes the graceful assassin out of vengeance? Is he actually just Ezio from Assassin's Creed? Because apparently those two things just got married, Final Fantasy and Assassin's Creed, but that is not my department. Talk to someone who knows more about Ubisoft, aka one of Ven's contacts. That is Ven's department, not mine. But the point being, if he had some kind of connection with her, whether it is as her murderer or her friend or her avenger, there is that mysterious woman-y figure during the third form of his final boss fight and Retrain of Memories, and I wonder if that is somehow connected to her. Is that actually her nobody, or part of her for some reason? Or it could go into a lot of other theories, like theories I have about how Keyblades are made of people because this is a JRPG and when are things not made of people, stuff like that. But there being a random womanly figure, and now there's suddenly a random mysterious girl who would have an impact or connection with Marluxia's backstory, makes that a thing. Or it could be Skuld. Maybe he winds up with a connection with Skuld instead, and that would make even more sense because she's a Valkyrie, blah blah blah. Which, side note, if Ven, Yenzo, aka Blaine, and Marluxia are all in the future, where the fuck are Skuld and Ephemera? At this point, I don't know how much of this theory has gone around on the internet, and I don't know if it's one of those theories where it's like, you don't know when it happened, you don't know if you came up with it yourself, if it's an original thought, or if it was fucking sublimized into your head, inception by Tumblr for something. But that's the idea that Ephemera and Skuld could be Xehanort or someone else's parents. Notably because Skuld has the amber yellow eyes and Ephemera has the white hair. Or if they could have wound up on the island and be the progenitors of someone like Riku. Well, and of course, Xehanort also on the island, so on and so forth. Especially why they aren't in the future, given that they seem to be the trio that is in all of the artwork. And Ven is in the future, seemingly by himself, but then again, we saw what happened to the Wayfinder trio, not to put salt in that wound.